Mystic Empire. What if I told you that the greatest story ever told is one we've collectively forgotten? What if the evidence of a global catastrophe, one that wiped a near-perfect civilization from the earth, is hidden in plain sight, buried beneath the waves of our own subconscious? Welcome, seekers of truth, to Mystic Empire. Today, we are not just exploring a legend. We are embarking on a journey to reclaim a lost chapter of human history. We are diving into the heart of the ocean's greatest mystery, Atlantis, the lost empire of the sea. For thousands of years, the story of Atlantis has captivated kings and philosophers, scientists and dreamers. It is a ghost in the machine of our history, a shimmering echo of something magnificent that was lost. To some, it is a mere myth, a philosophical allegory invented by Plato. To others, it is a literal, sunken continent, waiting to be discovered. But what if the truth is far more profound, far more inspiring than either of those possibilities? What if Atlantis is not just a place, but a state of being? A warning, and a promise, encoded in the very fabric of our species. Our story begins not with a dive into the ocean, but with a journey back in time, to the heart of ancient Greece. Around 360 BC, the philosopher Plato, one of the greatest minds the world has ever known, sat down to write two of his most famous dialogues, the Timaeus and the Critias. In these works, he did not present Atlantis as a fable. He presented it as historical fact, a story passed down to his ancestor, Solon, by Egyptian priests in the city of Say. These priests, keepers of records far older than any in Greece, scolded the Greeks for being a youthful people with no deep memory. They spoke of a mighty power that came from outside the Mediterranean, from a vast island located in the Atlantic Ocean, beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. This island, they said, was larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined. A verdant, mountainous paradise, teeming with natural resources, from exotic fruits and fragrant woods to precious metals, including the legendary orichalcum, a mysterious metal that shone like fire. And upon this island, a civilization flourished unlike any other. The Atlanteans, descendants of the sea god Poseidon, were not just advanced, they were semi-divine. They built a metropolis of breathtaking beauty and engineering prowess. The heart of their empire was the royal city, built on a hill, surrounded by concentric rings of land and water, connected by great canals and tunnels wide enough for the largest ships to pass. The central citadel, a marvel of architecture, housed a magnificent temple to Poseidon, its interior adorned with silver, gold, and ivory, and at its center, a giant statue of the god driving a chariot pulled by 6 winged horses. But Atlantis was more than just a beautiful city. It was a society of order and harmony. The kings, descendants of Poseidon's 10 sons, were wise and just. They governed by a sacred code inscribed on a pillar of orichalcum in the temple. They met regularly in a sacred grove to pass judgment, always ensuring their power was tempered by virtue. For generations, the Atlanteans lived with a noble spirit and a graceful character. They saw the worldly gifts as but a passing possession, and their wealth did not corrupt them. They were paragons of wisdom, strength, and beauty. They built a vast network of gardens, baths, and gymnasiums. They constructed a sophisticated irrigation system for their plains. They trained a powerful army and a formidable navy. Their influence stretched across the ocean, forming a confederation of kings that held sway over parts of Europe as far as Italy, and Africa as far as Egypt. For a time, Atlantis was the beacon of the world, a utopian empire that represented the pinnacle of human potential. But then, something shifted. As Plato so powerfully recounts, the divine portion within the Atlanteans began to fade. It was diluted too often and too much by the human, mortal admixture. Their noble character could not endure the great wealth they possessed. They grew corrupt. They became filled with unrighteous ambition and greed. The very virtue that had been their foundation began to crumble. The kings, once just, now sought only power and material gain. They stopped listening to the laws of the gods and became a disgrace to their noble heritage. Zeus, the king of the gods, saw this corruption. He saw a once great civilization losing its soul, becoming a tyrannical force of avarice and injustice. And so, he assembled the other gods in his holy dwelling and pronounced his judgment. He would deliver a punishment upon Atlantis that would serve as a lesson for all of humanity. And what a punishment it was! Plato's description is one of the most vivid and terrifying in all of ancient literature. He writes of violent earthquakes and floods. In a single day and night of misfortune, the entire island of Atlantis was swallowed by the sea and disappeared. The sea in that area became impassable and impenetrable, he says, because of the shallow mud that the sunken island left behind. A mighty empire, a civilization of gods among men, was erased from the face of the earth in a cataclysm of fire and water. The Atlantic Ocean, which bore its name, became its tomb. And with that, Plato's story ends. Abruptly, the Critias dialogue is unfinished. It's as if the destruction was so absolute, so final, that not even the story could survive intact. The silence that follows is deafening. It leaves us with one burning question: was it real? This is where our modern quest begins. For centuries, scholars have dismissed Atlantis as a philosophical fiction, a cautionary tale Plato invented to illustrate his ideas about the ideal state and the consequences of moral decay. And indeed, it serves that purpose brilliantly. But what if Plato was pointing to a deeper, geological and historical truth? What if the memory of a real catastrophe was preserved in this story? The search for a literal Atlantis has become one of the greatest treasure hunts in history. And the theories are as vast and deep as the ocean itself. Let's dive into the most compelling ones. The most traditional theory places Atlantis right where Plato said it was, in the Atlantic Ocean. Proponents point to the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, a massive underwater mountain range running north to south through the Atlantic. Could a large island have existed there, on a tectonic plate that later subsided? Some point to the Azores Islands, which are the peaks of this ridge, as the possible mountain tops of the sunken continent. Sailors have reported pulling up strange, man-made looking rock samples from the seafloor in this region. But the immense depth and the scale of subsidence required make this a difficult case for mainstream geology. Then, there is the Minoan hypothesis. This is one of the most popular and scientifically plausible theories. Around 1600 BC, the island of Thera, now known as Santorini, was home to the thriving Minoan civilization, a sophisticated, peaceful, and artistically gifted culture centered on Crete. The Minoans built magnificent palace complexes with running water and elaborate frescoes. They were a major naval power, a beacon in the Bronze Age. But Thera was a volcano, and it erupted with a force that makes the eruption of Mount Vesuvius look like a firecracker. It was one of the largest volcanic events in human history. The eruption unleashed tsunamis, some estimates say over 100 feet high, that would have raced across the Mediterranean, utterly devastating the Minoan settlements on Crete. The ash cloud blotted out the sun, causing a volcanic winter and leading to the collapse of this advanced society. The parallels to Plato's story are striking. A sophisticated island-based civilization, wiped out in a single day and night by a cataclysm of fire and water. The concentric rings of the Santorini caldera, which you can still see today, are a near-perfect match for the description of Atlantis's capital city. Could the story of Atlantis be a distorted, magnified memory of the Thera eruption, passed down through generations and eventually told to Solon by the Egyptians? It fits the timeline, the geography of Athenian influence, and the archaeological evidence almost perfectly. Other theories place Atlantis in the Caribbean, near the Bahamas, pointing to underwater formations like the Bimini Road as potential ruins. Some look to Antarctica, suggesting a shift in the Earth's crust placed a once temperate continent under miles of ice. Others still believe it was in the North Sea, in a landmass known as Doggerland, which was flooded by rising sea levels at the end of the last ice age. The locations are debated endlessly. But with each potential site, we are forced to confront a powerful idea: our planet is dynamic and violent. Sea levels have risen and fallen by hundreds of feet. Coastlines have been redrawn. Entire landmasses have been swallowed by the waves. The story of a great flood is not unique to Plato, it is a universal human memory. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the story of Noah's Ark, flood myths from the Americas to Australia, they all point to a shared, traumatic experience of a world consumed by water. So, whether Atlantis was a specific place or a composite memory of multiple catastrophes, the evidence suggests that the legend is rooted in truth. But I want to propose to you that finding the physical stones of Atlantis is only half the quest. The other half, the more important half, is finding its soul. Let's return to Plato's narrative. The true power of the Atlantis story is not in its description of golden statues and concentric canals. It is in its arc. It is the story of a rise and a fall. It is a story about us. The Atlanteans started with a divine spark. They built a society in harmony with nature and with the laws of the cosmos. They valued wisdom, justice, and community. They understood that true power came from spiritual alignment, not material accumulation. This is the promise of Atlantis, the pinnacle of what humanity can achieve. But then, they fell. And they fell not because of an external enemy, but from an internal sickness. They fell because of hubris. They fell because they forgot their connection to the divine. Their technology and their power outstripped their wisdom. Their wealth bred arrogance. Their ambition became unrighteous. They began to see themselves as masters of the world, rather than its stewards. They sought to conquer, not to coexist. Does any of this sound familiar? Look at our world today. We live in an age of breathtaking technological advancement. We have unlocked the power of the atom, spliced the gene, and connected the entire planet with a digital nervous system. We have comforts and capabilities that would make the kings of old seem like paupers. We are, in many ways, the modern Atlanteans. But at what cost? We are plundering the Earth's resources with an insatiable hunger. Our industries cloud the skies and poison the oceans. We are more connected digitally, yet more isolated spiritually than ever before. We have created weapons that could, in a single day and night of misfortune, render our entire civilization to dust. We are building our own version of the concentric rings, not with stone and canal, but with data and algorithms, often without the wisdom to use them for the true betterment of humanity. The fall of Atlantis is not just a story about the past, it is a prophecy for the future. It is a mirror held up to our own civilization, showing us a path we are dangerously close to treading. Plato's story is a warning that no civilization, no matter how advanced, no matter how powerful, is immune to the corrosive effects of greed and spiritual decay. But here is the most inspiring part of this entire mystery. The story of Atlantis does not end with its destruction. The legend says that not all was lost. That a few wise souls, seeing the corruption and the coming cataclysm, fled the island. They took with them not their gold or their treasures, but their knowledge. The sacred teachings, the laws of the universe, the secrets of the soul. They scattered across the globe, to Egypt, to the Americas, to the far corners of the earth, and they seeded new civilizations. This is the Atlantean diaspora theory, and it is a theory of profound hope. It suggests that the spark of Atlantis was never extinguished. It was only scattered. The great pyramids of Egypt, the megalithic temples of Malta, the astonishing precision of Stonehenge, the sophisticated astronomy of the Maya, could these be the legacy of those Atlantean refugees? Could the universal themes of a great flood and a lost golden age be the shared inheritance of all humanity, a memory of our common origin from a single, enlightened source? This changes everything. It means we are not searching for a dead city at the bottom of the ocean. We are searching for the living legacy of Atlantis within ourselves. The lost empire is not a place to be found, but a state of consciousness to be reclaimed. The wisdom of Atlantis, the harmony with nature, the pursuit of knowledge tempered by virtue, the understanding that true power is spiritual, this wisdom did not die. It went underground. It was preserved in mystery schools, in esoteric traditions, in the sacred art and architecture of ancient cultures, and in the deepest intuitions of the human heart. Our obsession with finding the physical ruins of Atlantis is, perhaps, a distraction. It is the ego's desire for external validation. The real quest is an internal one. It is the quest to rebuild Atlantis within our own souls, and within our own society. How do we do that? We do it by rejecting the path of the later Atlanteans, the path of greed, separation, and hubris. And we do it by embracing the path of the early Atlanteans, the path of wisdom, unity, and reverence for life. We rebuild Atlantis every time we choose cooperation over competition. We rebuild Atlantis every time a scientist uses their knowledge for healing instead of destruction. We rebuild Atlantis every time an engineer designs a system that works in harmony with the planet, not against it. We rebuild Atlantis every time an artist creates something that elevates the human spirit. We rebuild Atlantis every time we show compassion to a stranger, every time we stand up for justice, every time we seek to understand before we seek to be understood. The Lost Empire is a call to action. It is a call to remember who we are and what we are capable of. We are the children of a forgotten age of giants, not giants of stature, but giants of spirit. The potential for both our greatness and our folly is written in our DNA and echoed in our oldest stories. So, the next time you look out at the ocean, remember that its depths hold a secret. But the secret is not just of fallen pillars and drowned cities. The secret is a message in a bottle from our own past, washed up on the shores of our present. The message is simple, and it is urgent. You carry the spark of Atlantis within you. You are a citizen of that lost, glorious empire. The choices you make, the values you hold, the love you share, this is the currency that will determine whether our modern world will suffer the fate of Atlantis, or whether we will finally, collectively, rise from the waves of ignorance and build something even more magnificent. The legend says Atlantis will rise again. It will not rise as a continent bursting from the sea foam. It will rise when a critical mass of humanity awakens to its true potential. It will rise when we silence the noise of greed and listen once more to the whisper of the gods within. It will rise not in one day and night of destruction, but in a dawn of a new consciousness, a new golden age. The lost empire of the sea was never truly lost. It was only waiting for us to remember, waiting for us to become worthy of its name once more. The story of Atlantis is not over. We are writing its next chapter, right now, with every thought, every word, and every deed. Let us make it a chapter worthy of the legend. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the deep. This is Mystic Empire. Until next time, keep seeking the truth.